pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Kate, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes. Gary Cunningham.
Here.
Patty Crowan.
Here.
Marie McFarland.
Here.
Sean Keir.
Here.
Miles Schlesinger.
Here.
Doug Bryson is excused, and Steve Griffiths.
Here. Are there any changes to the agenda or revisions?
No, there aren't.
Okay. May we have a motion to approve the minutes for our June 19th meeting?
I motion to approve the minutes from the June 19th meeting.
Second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Now is the time in our meeting for public comments on non-agenda items, items that are not on our agenda tonight. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes per speaker, and keep in mind that you are being broadcast on live TV. Do we have any public comments tonight? Seeing none. No final orders, resolutions, or written communications. We do have a public hearing and a deliberation tonight for 6.1 PUD 2018-01, Lincoln Palisades Phase 4 Planned Unit Development, the preliminary master plan. And it is now 6:02 p.m. and the public hearing for file PUD 2018-01 is now open. This public hearing concerns a request for preliminary master plan approval for an 11-lot residential planned unit development on 2.07 acres on the east side of Northeast Voyage Way. The applicant and property owner is Steve Lindell et al., doing business as Alpha Building Ventures, LLC. The Commission must take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the Commission wish to declare an ex parte contact, conflict of interest, or bias in this matter? Seeing none. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the qualifications of a commissioner to participate in this matter? Seeing none. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to consider this matter? Seeing none. Okay. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the City Code and ORS 197.7635. And staff will now read a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. Deborah?
Find them. I'm sorry. I can tell you what they are. They are
Microphone, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. They are the single-family zone. It is 1716, and the planned unit development 1752 to 40. Is that right?
Okay, thank you. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable substantive criteria previously listed or such other criteria in the plan or land use regulations which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the decision maker to respond to the issue precludes any action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the end of this hearing, any person who participated may request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request that the record be left open to submit additional written testimony, argument, or evidence. Before the staff presents a report, I would like to summarize the adopted public hearing procedures. A brochure outlining the procedures is at the entrance to the council chambers. Generally, the order of proceedings is as follows. Preliminary matters and required statements, that's what we're doing now. Staff report, questions of staff, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, those opposed, rebuttal by the applicant, requests of continuances or to leave the record open, close of the hearing, close of the record, request to submit written argument, deliberations, and decision. The city has established some time limits. The applicant will have 15 minutes and may reserve up to 5 minutes of that time for rebuttal. After the applicant testifies, any person may speak for up to 3 minutes. If the Planning Commission has questions of you, your time responding to any questions will not be counted in your time limit. If you wish to speak, please write your name and mailing address clearly on the sign-up list at the entrance. Please speak directly into the microphone and begin by stating your name. Don't give your address, just your name. And if you also have written testimony to submit into the record, please provide a copy to Kate, our recorder. Deborah, will you please present the staff report?
Thank you. All right, the planned unit development that is proposed is in the north part of Lincoln City. It is on the east side of Voyage Way. I want to show you this slide that demonstrates where Lincoln Palisades is, because we keep bringing up various phases of Lincoln Palisades. And so you can see from here that Lincoln Palisades, this whole thing was Lincoln Palisades 2, and this is also Lincoln Palisades. They have re-subdivided, as I described in the background to the report, and so we approved Lincoln Palisades 3 last year, just about a year ago, and now this is Lincoln Palisades 4, this strip along the east side of Northeast Voyage Way. Okay, and here it is in the aerial photo, so you can see how it lays in relationship to the built environment. One of the comments, we got 2 comments, written comments, and one of them was a concern about the wetlands, and I want to show where this is in relationship to the wetlands. This is the proposed development, and then these lots are all lined up here. Oh, well, I guess it comes later. I'm sorry, but the right in here is where the wetlands are. The owner of this, of the Lincoln Palisades, has dedicated 18 acres of wetlands, basically, to the city of Lincoln City. So we now own that.
Is that managed as open space now?
Yes, it still has the R175 zoning, but it will be treated as open space by the city.
Is that shown on this map?
It's not on this one. You can see it in this outline right here. I do have it in here somewhere. Let me zip ahead. Maybe I can find it. It's a long way in. There we go. So you can see the wetlands is in this stripy designation. And our designation on our GIS is not as accurate as the wetlands determination that was done for the project. And that we did get a letter from Lauren Brown at the Department of State Lands, who says that it appears that the development is in conformance with that approval that they got in 2012, which is effective until 2019.
Can I ask a question about that? Did the 2012, did what they approve in 2012, is that reflected in what they approved in 2012, the lot, in terms of the lot delineation?
Our delineation, or our image here, is not as accurate as that determination. But the determination that they made was, basically they designed the subdivision to just be up to but not encroaching into the wetlands.
And that's what the Department of Land approved at that time.
Yes, well, and we gave them a notice of this proposal, and so they responded with an email that said, yes, this appears to be in conformance with that approval that they gave in 2012, and that approval is still effective.
I wanted to ask you, are those lots going to be fenced off from the wetlands, or are they just a continuation of the backyard as far as view and such?
We don't have any requirement about fencing. That could be something you would want to suggest as a condition, but we don't have anything in our code.
And state lands doesn't have anything in their code regarding jurisdictional wetlands and protection of them?
They do have a requirement that you can neither remove more than 50 cubic yards from the wetlands, and you cannot fill more than 50 cubic yards into the wetlands. But that's, you cannot remove native vegetation. But I don't really think that there's a lot more in terms of creating a barrier between
So there's no buffer.
adjoining properties. No.
Is that land, is it flat into the wetlands, or is there a drop?
There's quite a bit of slope. I think some of your attachments that were in the application materials show you the amount of slope. And actually, Rich Catlin, who is with Reese and Associates, not here this evening, but he was at our site plan review, and he was commenting that the flattest part of these lots is near the street, and he anticipates that's where the building sites will be, because it does get harder to develop with the steeper slopes towards the rear of the lots.
Deborah, do we know, this is defined as a significant wetland, what that
Yes.
term significant means?
Yes. Well, there are just wetlands, and then there are significant wetlands. And Richard, maybe you can share with us what exactly the distinction is.
Under the statewide planning goals, Goal 5, back in around 2000, we designated some wetlands as significant and some as just regular wetlands. And there was a process that the state has on the factors that go into what makes a wetland significant as opposed to just an ordinary wetland. There was a long public process on designating the wetlands. There was a wetland inventory done, and then I think that was in the 80s. I think the inventory was done, and then in the late 90s they started working on the designation of what was significant. What the main thing that significance means as a practical matter is you can't do anything to them. No fill is allowed, no removal is allowed, no culverts can go in, no roads on them. You can put a bridge across a significant wetland, but you cannot put them in a culvert.
What about runoff? Do you have to control runoff from a nearby development into the wetland?
Under our standards, you always have to control runoff so that it's basically the same as it would be in an undeveloped state. Well, at least for the 25-year storm, is that right? Yeah, 25-year storm.
And there are no setback requirements on adjacent development?
That's right.
So these are significant, they're identified as significant, although what I'm seeing here, it says it's a preliminary jurisdictional determination. It's advisory only, so does that mean that there's another determination that comes into this process at some point?
There was a determination made, as I said, back in the late 90s up until around 2000 that this particular wetland is a significant
Is
wetland.
significant, okay. And yet you have no suggestions for controlling anything that might run off of a fertilized, pesticided backyard? Seems...
Okay. maybe Stephanie Reed, our city engineer, can talk about what was required of Lincoln Palisades 2, but at that time, there was a storm water runoff analysis, and they addressed pre-treatment and that kind of thing. But I don't know whether that would apply or help with this particular question, not with yards.
Interesting, okay.
Deborah, question. This piece of paper talks about the need for, if there's 50 cubic yards of material to be removed or added. Do you know how much fill is going to be put in this, if any?
I don't believe any is, and the engineer, David Reese is here, of Reese and Associates, and that's the engineering firm that developed the plans, so he will be able to tell you that later on, but my understanding is that there's no fill.
Well, according to Richard, what he just said, if it's designated as significant wetland, 0 can be put in or taken out.
I think 0 is
Yeah,
the,
okay.
but the 50 cubic yards, is that considered
That's
0?
No, it's not considered 0. 0 is 0. 50
Okay.
cubic yards, up to 50 cubic yards, you don't need a permit from the state for a wetland, but it still would, with a significant wetland, it's not allowed in the city.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so I was just showing you the lots. There are 11 lots on the east side of Wage Way proposed in this development. And I divided them up so I could show them a little bit bigger. But you have this material in your packets in the application materials. I'm showing you the first 5 lots here. And you can see that except for these 3, they're all, well, these 2 are 7,500 square feet or more. These are just shy of that, about 15 square feet shy in each case. We do allow for variation from our standards in the planned unit developments. That is one of the advantages of using planned unit development. I think that this is an insignificant amount below the minimum, and these lots are substantially the same as those across the street and in the rest of the Palisades neighborhood. As we proceed further down the street, further south, these are also, these lots are all larger than 7,500 square feet. Maybe this one's a little bit shy again. And this one's 12,000, this one's 9,000, this one's over 8,000. Any lots over 8,000 could have a duplex on them, but this development as a whole is limited to a maximum of 12 lots. They're showing 11, so I have proposed as a condition that 2 of the lots have to have a restriction on their deeds that say that they are limited to 1 unit, so that we don't exceed that maximum 12. It doesn't matter to me which one it is. Anything over 8,000 is adequate in terms of our code for allowing a duplex.
Was that taken into consideration, the ADU allowance?
No, the ADU, the accessory dwelling units, is not calculated into density. So any of these lots could have an accessory dwelling unit if they meet the standards in that section of our code. And for those who are not familiar with accessory dwelling units, it's essentially a small unit that the property owner can add to the property and either live in it, him or herself, or can rent it. But right now, our code says that the property owner has to live in one or the other. So that is something that we added to our code a few years ago in order to increase opportunity for affordable housing. And as I said, it doesn't factor into the density.
Okay. Thank you.
Can you go back to the last slide, the one that's the upper ones? That second lot in, that
Yes.
is less than 7,500,
Yes.
that notch in it is to accommodate the wetland?
This east boundary line actually follows the delineation.
So if there was a buffer required around this wetland.
Mm-hmm.
That would cut further into that lot size.
Mm-hmm. We do have a buffer for riparian areas, which are stream banks, essentially. We do not have one for wetlands.
You should.
Well, we can work on that. We can work on that. Okay, let me see what else I can tell you about this subdivision. So we're moving into your authority to approve master plans, and in this case, we're doing the preliminary. This is the first crack at this subdivision and planned unit development. We require all planned unit, or all subdivisions that have more than 10 lots or are more than 2 acres to go through the planned unit development process rather than just a straight subdivision. And that's why you're seeing this. It's just barely over in both cases. So in this case, you have the authority to review the plans and the comments that are provided in the public hearing, give approval with conditions or disapproval. State your decision and reasons in writing addressing the specified criteria, and disapprove the plan if either as submitted or with conditions it does not meet any one or more of the criteria. And we'll go through the criteria next. So first of all, the R1 7.5 zone allows for single-family dwellings, so there's no zoning issue here. City services essentially are available, and I'll talk more about that when we get into the criteria. Lot requirements, as I mentioned, most meet all of the minimum standards in the R175 and also in Title 16, which is subdivisions. The PUD process allows for variation, and we have just a little bit of variation from the minimum. 3 lots are larger than the area required for duplexes, so we'll talk about how we can limit that later, and the PUD would allow for a total of 12 units. So the approval criteria. The first one is that the proposal is substantially compatible with the surrounding development and with what we anticipate for future development. And we look at 4 different things, basically the use, and as we've said, the use is single family, the surrounding property is single family. Density is another factor, and as I demonstrated in the staff report, the densities of the surrounding developments are either a little lower or a little higher, but this one sort of falls in the middle, so that is compatible. Lot sizes, again, are compatible with what we see in the surrounding subdivisions. Style and ambience. When we talk about style and ambience, we talk about the trees, street width, sidewalks, covenants, and conditions and restrictions. So here is the development just on the west side of Voyage Way. So these lots would be right across from this development. And you can see single family, same size lots. They have sidewalks. So they're sharing a street. And this is Voyage Way back here. This is the new street that they just constructed in Lincoln Palisades 3. This is Voyage Avenue. That's the long collector through Lincoln Palisades 2.
And the Phase 4 is where in that?
Phase 4 is right along here.
Drops off there, doesn't it?
So
if I can interrupt for 1 second. One thing to keep in mind as you go through the approval criteria is that if you're thinking of conditions of approval, they have to address approval criteria. In other words, you couldn't impose a condition that didn't address approval criteria. The idea of conditions is to make it so that the development does meet the approval criteria.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Would, for example, requesting a buffer on the lots that abut the wetland, that would be addressing the approval criteria in terms of compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood, correct?
You would want to explain
Yeah, you-
how that
Yeah.
is, how that does address a criteria when you propose that condition.
Right.
And you should be thinking as we move through these two, if there's anything you disagree with, then, that is, something you should either raise and discuss conditions that would make you feel more comfortable with it. And these criteria are also what you base your vote on in the end. Okay, so you can see the amount of drop-off here, and these dashed lines are contour lines. This is also showing,
What's the contour interval? How many feet?
I can pull that out here. It's a little hard to see on that. That is also the tree inventory, and that's really more the reason I put that on there. 5 feet? Okay.
So 5 feet to each line?
Yes, that sounds about right. And I did comment in my staff report about, how much drop-off there is from the curb to the back of those lots.
It's a little different.
Okay, I have everything but the elevations.
Actually, on the chart that you have or the drawing you have on your table in front of you, or on your seat in front of you,
They're just
it shows a 150-foot elevation and a 125-foot elevation. So you can see the two different lines there show that there is a lot of topography there.
Oh, I see their face.
And it would correspond with those being 5-foot contours.
As a mom, I think of a safety problem in a backyard with a drop-off. Is there anything to address that?
Well, typically what would happen, and you can ask the developer's representative more about what they anticipate for housing styles, but typically what would happen is they might build one story on the top, but around back it's actually 2 stories, so it goes all the way to the ground, but then it would gradually fall away. Or they could step it down, that house, so that it might be 1 story, but it would be stepped down. So it depends on the style of the house, but typically when we see a lot of slope in this area, you might have what looks like a 1-story from the front, but it's actually looks like a 2-story or 3-story from the other sides.
These are not single floor, 1-floor dwelling.
Not necessarily. We allow for up to 35-foot height on houses in this zone, and the 35 feet is an average of the midpoints of the 4 sides, assuming 4 sides. And so that is from the ground level, the approved grade or existing grade, up to the highest point of the roof. So if you could get 35 feet by having a house sitting flat on flat ground, and each side measures 35 feet. Or in this case, you might measure, like a 1-story house, as I said, in the front, 20 feet, and in the back it's 40 or 45, and it ends up being an average. So it does allow for a variation in building types, but typically people tend to kind of work with the topography that way. All right, so there are some larger trees, and I did call those out in the staff report. But fortunately, well, I guess, a lot of the trees right along the street had been removed in previous phases, but now the trees are mostly along the back part of the lot. So if in fact people are building their house sites close to the street as anticipated, then hopefully a lot of these trees will not have to be disturbed. But the development itself, because the street already exists and all they're putting in is the sidewalk, and a public utility easement and a tree yard, planting strip, it will not require any tree removal. So there will be no tree removal until this is all approved and we start issuing building permits. Once a property owner has a building permit, then they can remove trees for the construction of their house.
And, I mean, they can remove all the trees on the lot.
They could. They could if it's, yes, if the lot is a single-family lot and it cannot be subdivided, it isn't large enough to subdivide, then they can remove whatever trees they want. It's their choice. On a lot that's big enough to be subdivided a second time, and I guess none of these are, this one's 12, so you'd need 15 in order to get 2. But in that case, then, if you can, the owner can remove trees within 100 feet of the building footprint, I believe. So that's not relevant in this case. So I just put in a couple photos for, showing you the layout of the street, as this is looking from the south around the curve to the north, and you can see that there are some large Sitkas in there. But they are set back a ways. I think this is about the closest one to the street. And it seems to have, according to the inventory, it has a huge diameter, but it's not very tall, so I don't know, what has happened to cause that tree to be that particular shape.
Strong winds.
Yeah, I guess so. So another one of our criteria then is that the years for completion should be reasonable, and so I just the developers said that they expect to get this done in a couple years. Lincoln Palisades 3, which we approved a year ago already, is basically all constructed now. The infrastructure is in, and they tell me that the lots are all pre-sold. So that seems like a reasonable timeline. This is Lincoln Palisades 3. Now the sidewalks go in as lots are developed. So you're not seeing sidewalks around this street, even though we approve them, and that's because they go in as the buildings go up. And there's advantages and disadvantages to that, but I think the advantage is that you're not breaking up the sidewalk as your construction vehicles are coming and going and so forth. So, but maybe our city engineer or the developer has more ideas about that.
Deborah, could I ask a question about that? Are cement sidewalks required, or could they be permeable gravel sidewalks?
I don't think they can be gravel, can they, Stephanie? You'll have to come up and talk.
Oh, right. That's a good point.
The official here.
Good evening. So our standard is concrete or pervious or impervious surface, primarily for ADA. You can put some gravel paths and make them ADA compliant, but our standard is concrete or asphalt sidewalk. Yeah.
Okay. So the next criteria is limitations on construction impacts, making sure that this development doesn't have inordinate impacts on surrounding properties when it's under construction. So we've already talked about the timing of tree removal. We do have standards and regulations about burning, about truck track out, or, the mud, tracking out mud onto the street and so forth. We have a limit on noise generally and quiet hours for the city. And so construction noise would fall into that. Construction traffic is something that we have added in for the last couple planned unit developments that I'm aware of. And that is to say that they should observe the same hours as the quiet hours.
Deborah, is it reasonable to ask, perhaps as a condition, that construction work be limited to the workday and not be held on the weekends or on holidays?
I believe we did that in Olivia Beach, and I'm not sure whether we did that in Lincoln Palisades 3, but that's a possibility.
So the conditions here of approval seem to all have to do with construction or compatibility with use. Did you look at traffic impacts? And was that evaluated somehow during the larger master plan
Well, our next
evaluation, or?
our next
Oh, there you go.
our next criteria has to do
Okay.
with unreasonable impacts or impacts on of the development. The last one was about actual construction
Right.
impacts. This one is about the impacts on the surrounding from this particular development, these 11 lots that we would be creating. And the traffic impact analysis is required when you exceed certain thresholds, and that's spelled out in our code. And this would not exceed those thresholds. Now, maybe originally, and I suspect originally when Lincoln Palisades came in and it was a much larger development, that would have required a traffic impact analysis. But when we're talking about 5.65 trips per peak hour, 11 trips per peak hour based on, single-family homes or acres, respectively, that is not enough to trigger that.
Right, but we're doing a little chip here in the Palisades and looking at each individual phase and saying it's not an impact traffic-wise, but we're not really looking at cumulative impact of all of the area that would be developed. And I'm thinking, maybe selfishly, because I live up in the Rhodes End area, of the danger of that street at Port and Logan, which is what I assume a number of these cars would be using. So,
Stephanie, would you like to come up again and talk about Port Avenue? We do have some planned improvements for Port Avenue.
the traffic circle?
But where it makes the elbow, not where it meets Logan.
Where it meets Logan is really the dangerous spot.
So the short answer is we do not have plans to do an intersection improvement at Logan and Port.
Okay.
The need I can see, I understand what you're saying. We are going to at least repair Port, do an overlay and calm the traffic at the corner of Port Place and Logan. However, that's on our list to look at as like you say, as things build out, and that intersection does need to be looked at.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Not a
Was-
very satisfying answer,
Isn't-
but that's the one.
I'm sorry, isn't one of, I don't know if it's this one or the other one, is Voyage Way, this is Voyage Way, Voyage Lane going to be finished, and that was going to be the idea of the construction crew route? Was that
Voyage
this deal, or am I
Avenue is,
thinking of-
it is complete now all the way up to Northeast Devils Lake
Oh,
Boulevard.
so it does connect.
It does connect.
Okay, cool. Okay, that's good.
And can I ask you another question?
Yes.
Did you say that when they put in when they first developed this idea, that they did do a traffic impact at that point in time, or not?
They did.
Okay, so it has been done in the whole. Okay, just wondered.
In fact, I will add that all of Lincoln Palisades is under a traffic impact fee that goes toward larger improvements to the intersection at West Devils Lake Road and Highway 101. We do have a project plan for that, and we are going to use the fees that we collect from Palisades. So that was one of the, they participated, the Palisades participated with one big report on other developments in the north area when they first were approved. So a lot of history, but these lots will still pay over $5,000 a lot toward that improvement.
That single improve, so are there any other improvements, like maybe Logan and Port, that would be taken care of with a fee like that?
The plan, the report that I'm talking about was very specific on what improvements could be made with this money. And they were primarily on Highway 101. So we can't see right now that we can use that pot of money for improvements on Logan and Port.
I'm assuming that the work would be done on Devil's Lake Road, not 101, since 101 is the state's problem?
Well, this was part in...
Responsibility, I mean?
Well, we contribute a lot to the improvements that go on Highway 101. Otherwise, we have to wait for the state. And that's kind of we're using a grant program, a grant project. So most of the money is coming from the state, but our matching fund is really what we're using these fees for on that project.
Well,
yeah.
Now that I know it's tied to a grant, I understand the stipulations,
Yeah.
or why there is. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah.
Okay, so, all right, so landscaping, they are showing a landscape strip between the sidewalk and and a public utility easement. That's kind of rare, and we were discussing, Richard and I were just discussing this before the meeting, you know, that can be desirable, but it's not something that we customarily require, so it's kind of nice to see that. That gives an opportunity that's 5.5 feet, so it's not a lot of room, but a room to plant, you know, street trees. And of course, then we do require landscaping for each building lot when that, you know, as part of that building permit. Okay, so the next criteria is whether there is infrastructure in the vicinity of this new development to serve the new development. And the following one after that is whether the infrastructure provided by this development is adequate. So this is in the vicinity, and we are saying yes, the streets are adequate. And notwithstanding the comment about the Port Logan intersection, we do have Voyage Avenue is a collector. Well, it's a local street, but it's the widest local street I think we have in town. And we also have Northeast Devils Lake Boulevard. So both of those streets are new, they're in good condition, and able to handle this additional traffic. Water is adequate. We've made some improvements recently to our water system. We have upgraded our sewer lift station at Devil's Lake Road, and so it is adequate. It provides for all of this northern property. And as we mentioned earlier, the drainage pretreatment and detention were addressed in an earlier phase and are adequate for this development. So the on-site infrastructure, the utilities really was the only issue, and the services were already stubbed into the property lines, but the property lines that we're seeing were not what they anticipated earlier, so some of those utilities were coming in on the adjoining property, and we're going to have to, and so they had to adjust the property lines. If you look right at the top where the property lines meet the street, some of them go like this, and that is so that the utilities will be on the same lot as the house it's serving, because we do not like to have a situation where the utilities are on the adjoining lot and then through some kind of easement they cross somebody else's property in order to get to the person's property that they're serving. So that's why that little odd adjustment in the property lines. Other than that, the sewer and water is available, and And they already have the streets, so our infrastructure is adequate for the proposal. The last criteria is that that the planned unit development doesn't show any more than the maximum number allowed, and they're showing 11. The maximum is 12. And then it also says that there should be a 15% landscaping. And since I've been here, I've interpreted that to mean that we need landscaping within the subdivision, and because they're single-family lots, they all have a substantial yard area, so it's not requesting or asking for 15% of the lot in addition to what's on those individual lots. So because we do require on single-family lots that we have a maximum building coverage of 35%, we have a maximum impervious surface coverage of 55%, and a minimum 20% planting area. So that does provide substantial green space. In addition to that, the owner, as I mentioned, has dedicated 18 acres right behind the subdivision to the city for open space, and that contains that sensitive wetland area. So that is a substantial amount of green space surrounding and in this subdivision. All right, so then I did show you the wetlands and the 18 acres. And to give you an idea, this portion right here, this lot, is the green lines are the lot lines, and then I highlighted the 18 acres in this aqua color to make it stand out for you. But Lincoln Palisades 3 is up here. This is Lincoln Palisades 4. Some future time there will be another phase that will include this property right here. So the development will surround but not encroach in the wetland area.
Deborah, where does that wetland drain to?
It drains to Devil's Lake.
So it has an outlet. It's not surrounded by hills on all sides, or?
I don't have a bigger picture, and maybe in that first picture I can go back to that and we can kind of get an idea where it goes. Or I could pull up our GIS if that would be helpful. If you'd like, I can do that.
That's okay.
Oh, okay. All right, so, well, let me see. Maybe I can go back up to the first slide and see if that first slide that was kind of an area-wide slide, no, that's not very helpful in this case. Okay. Okay, so I'm down to the recommendation then, and our recommendation is that you consider the staff report, you take testimony, you make findings, and then direct the staff to write up your findings, your conclusions, and your final order. We do have a couple conditions that we're recommending. One is that we route the construction vehicles to Northeast Devils Lake Boulevard rather than through the established neighborhood to the south, and which is the same thing we did with Lincoln Palisades 3. And I do want to throw out the woman from Cape Fowl Weather Coffee who delivers coffee. She's the roaster, and she delivers coffee to our break room. And she told me, she lives in the Lincoln Palisades neighborhood, and she said that the development of Lincoln Palisades 3 went really well in her estimation. That she said that they were very good about keeping the place clean and about respecting the quiet hours and so forth. So that was really nice to hear, and I unsolicited, so I wanted to pass that on. Secondly, that they curtail construction traffic during the city's quiet hours to minimize negative impacts for neighbors.
And Deborah, these recommended conditions are in addition to
That's right.
Attachment A that was in our packet, correct?
That's right. Exhibit A includes all the conditions that we came up with when we did a site plan review on this project, and both Public Works has provided comments, suggested conditions, and so has planning. I would say for planning, we didn't have a whole lot. You know, it's a fairly simple subdivision because it does not include a development of any new street. And so the layout is pretty well predetermined. And so, and it doesn't seem anything out of the ordinary. And I think Public Works had basically, you know, I think their standard, you know, conditions, and except for the adjusting the lot lines to accommodate the services, and that has been done already in a revised plan that you have before you. So, is there anything else? Would you like me to pull up GIS? Well,
That's fine.
no. Okay.
Any questions, further questions of Deborah? Patty?
Yeah, Deborah, you said that all of the lots have been pre-sold, and I think I noticed that statement in this document as well. Are these lots going to be built as custom homes, or is the builder building them? What are these going to look like? Other than, I mean, we know single family maybe with walkout basement, daylight basement type arrangement down the slope, but if they're all pre-sold lots,
No,
is there any?
I was saying that the ones in Lincoln Palisades 3 have been pre-sold.
Oh,
these.
These have not been pre-sold.
I don't have any information about that, but
That was
maybe
confusing in
David
the
Reese will
document.
be
It
able
looked
to.
like-
Pardon me?
That was confusing me in the document. It looked
Okay,
like they
I'm
said
sorry.
they were pre-sold. but
Okay,
maybe
no,
it
I
was
didn't mean to
straight.
suggest that.
Okay.
David Reese can probably talk about that, and also what he expects is going to, if he has information about what might be developed on the lots. Since the covenants and restrictions
CC&Rs.
do not specify whether they're one-story or two-story, and I think some of these in this neighborhood probably technically are over one story, but we do not restrict that, only in terms of height.
Okay.
Any further questions? Thank you. We now have the applicant's presentation, and you will have 15 minutes, and you can reserve 5 of those for rebuttal if you feel that's necessary. And please speak directly into the microphone.
Good evening, Commission. My name is David Reese. I'm with Reese and Associates, and I'll be making the presentation tonight. This is a holiday week, and Rich is on vacation. So, but that's okay. I've done this many times before and over all the years, so I'm happy to do this. I'm actually going to reserve 5 minutes for rebuttal, so I'll be less than 10 minutes. And I'm not going to go through the entire package because this is the master plan. You're going to get another shot at it when you get to the detailed plan that actually is the subdivision. So let me just say that there are a couple of things that have been brought up that I would like to address to make sure that we have some comfort or some more coverage, I guess, as to how those are. First of all, the 18 acres that were dedicated to the city are not all wetlands. So if you saw the map, it says wetlands, 18 acres and wetlands. It represents, there's about 4.5 or 5 acres out of the 18 is wetlands. So the open space dedication was meant to protect the wetlands. Yes, there's an area where it gets close on those 2 or 3 lots, but if you look closely at the map, the tentative that we have, there's only 1 lot that actually has the wetlands within a few feet. And all of the buildings will be built to the normal setback conditions that would be imposed on any subdivision, which would be a normal backyard setback. So no disturbance or no construction that would be, so that really is your buffer, so to speak, from the wetlands. Imposing that there's a fence, I've talked with some folks from DSL, and they've actually said that's an encouragement for an owner to throw his grass clippings over into a wetland, as opposed to leaving that open so that it actually, you can observe that it is a wetland. It's, got either a do not disturb line. It's a platted lot, so there will be no fill. First of all, there'll be no fill from any of these developed lots into the wetland, because we don't own any of the wetlands. The wetlands, the city owns them. They own what's there. So I wanted to make sure that was clear, so we wouldn't need to worry about the significance or the 50 cubic yard threshold that DSL has. And again, the steepness and the contours and the lay of the land. Commissioner Crone, you're actually absolutely right. Daylight basements is probably the preferred design for these homes. And we don't know at this point what the actual homes will be built, but since they're in the same subdivision that across the street and have the same CC&Rs, they'll have the same styles. So they'll adhere to the 35-foot conditions for height, which most likely is going to make them single story at the street because of the contour, the way the slopes are that are there. That also addresses the safety issue that Commissioner McFarland brought up, which has to do with children and steep slopes. And if we have a daylight basement, that allows you to have a lower level and an exit to a patio or et cetera. I would expect some folks will actually do very little, if any, lot development other than to put a post and beam deck so they can use that for observation because of the beauty of the open space that's adjacent. There may be a few that actually have a terrace, build a little terrace so they can have a flat spot and play catch with their kid or however that is. But again, those are individual opportunities, and they'll come in during the building permit process and be addressed. So those are really the two things that I wanted to to talk about. The sidewalks, we can talk a little bit about the sidewalks, the pros and cons. Constructing sidewalks beforehand and having them sit until the lots are sold, and then having the contractor come in and run over it with his skid steer, and then the sidewalks are broken up and they want to wash their hands and say, I didn't do it, I was here that, so a lot of jurisdictions do exactly what is being proposed here, and that is have the sidewalks installed at the time of the home construction so that they're finished and it's a clean look. But it's not to say, I've actually had a couple of clients who said they felt the opposite. They wanted to put them in because it was more marketable. So to answer the question about pre-sales or not, in this case, the client tells me that there are a lot of folks who are waiting to make a reservation for these lots. They've been waiting for quite a while. So they're not sold. They can't be sold until they're platted, but they're kind of spoken for and ready to go to be taken advantage of the opportunity. The two conditions that are being proposed actually have to do with your standards, and that is your standard for construction in the city of Lincoln City addresses work hours and addresses those conditions. So we don't necessarily need to layer another one on it that says adhere to your specs, because that's what we do when we go to the pre-construction conference. And in this case, there's really no construction. There's going to be 3 water services and 2 sanitary sewer services because the street's already built. So there really won't be that month and a half of trucks in and out and hauling rock and so forth. There'll be it's almost like a home construction. You'll be there for 2 days, put in a couple of water services, and then move on. And then the condition about using voyage as the preferred path for construction activities is not only fair, but again, that gets addressed during the pre-construction conference with the city when we say, so now we're going to make some public improvements, and we ask the contractor to provide a traffic control plan. That has to be approved by the city, and the city engineer will say, no, I don't. That's right, you're going to use Voyage Avenue. So again, the power of the pen is still there in both instances. It doesn't bother us if you want to make them as a condition, but they're not necessary, I guess is what I'm saying. With that concludes my remarks. There were 2 letters, as Deborah said, and that were offered up. And again, I think this developer has been very sensitive to trying to maintain the I guess, the ambiance or the neighborhood feel that's been there before, so that's not their intention. First of all, not to come in and build 11 spec homes, for one thing, and have them all be, I think there are folks who are going to do some unique things with those lots. And they'll do everything they can to preserve, the views for everyone, because that's part of what is part of the marketing appeal for both of these. And other than that, I really, don't have anything else to address. The wetlands, again, that delineation, it's actually a 2014 delineation. It's good till 2019. But all the city did, which is normal and customary, is notify DSL and say, we have this application, do you have any concerns? They looked at the maps, they looked at the layout, and the property owned by the city is the one that owns the wetlands, so there's nothing in this subdivision that has anything to do with the wetlands. With that, I would love to entertain any questions you may have.
Any questions for, yes, Gary?
First question is, do you know where that wetlands drains to? That question was raised before, and it looked like...
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So if you take north Devil's Lake Boulevard and you head towards the village of the Cascade Head, there is a low spot as you start to go up the hill, and that's where the intersection that breaks off and goes to the golf course and then goes on up the hill into the subdivision. That saddle is the crossing point where that wetland has a culvert. So there's a culvert under the road that wetland drains under there and then goes down and goes through the golf course area and then makes its way underneath 101 and goes to Devil's Lake.
And I have a question for you.
Okay.
I'd like you to, I think you answered it earlier, but I'd like confirmation. And the reason I ask this is, and I've noticed in my neighborhood that when a new development comes in, often on a lot, all the trees are cut down, and often all the topsoil is also removed, and then the foundation is built for the home, and the home is built, and after that, sometimes some of the topsoil is brought back in. But it seems to me your style of constructing the homes here would be different. You would encourage folks to try to preserve as many of the large trees as possible and not remove the topsoil, or how do you do it?
Well, first of all, I'm the engineer and planner. The developer, who is a builder but is not building on these homes, could answer that, but they really aren't going to put restrictions to those lots as to who buys them and how they build them. But in normal construction, if it were a flat lot, the method you described is the method of choice by most contractors. In a condition where you have a steep lot, you want to avoid as much grading as possible, because that's cost, for one thing. So if you can build on a smaller envelope and stack or go up, so you have your daylight basement and maybe it's 1 story down, 1 story up, or 2 down and 1 up, or 1 and 2, and tighten that up, then you, again, can maintain what's already on the lot with regard to vegetation. Now, it's still your preference if you want to re-landscape the entire lot to do something different, but again, it's a cost and a choice. And frankly, the soil's very good, so I would think they would want to leave as much topsoil and maybe augment the landscaping with some plants that are of their choice. There are not any, from the tree plan, you can see there's only 2 trees that actually would come into play and they may be incorporated into a house plan that preserves them. So I guess that's the best way I can answer that.
Thank you. Yeah, any other questions?
Thank you.
Is there testimony in support of the application? Is there testimony in opposition to the application? Yes, please come forward and speak into the microphone and tell us your name. You will have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is...
Speak into the microphone,
Okay.
please.
My name is Lisa Margaret Powell, and I live in the Palisades area. And I just want to say that as you consider all of these things, and as you talked about the cumulative effects of the building in this area, I don't know if there's any way to slow down this process. I know everybody doesn't want more building, and I'm not saying not to do that, but, sorry. I feel like once you get there, it will be hard to go back. And there's a lot about this wetland that is not, you just can't show more, little photos, and all the charts and everything won't really tell you the whole story. I encourage you all to drive by there and see it, see the elk that use it, the bald eagles that use it. I don't know how we all get to have more building, and I understand that that's necessary, and still protect this, but it's awfully close to what's happening there, and I just think that everyone should slow down a bit and really consider it, because again, once you take some of this away, you will never be able to go backwards. And that's all I ask, is that people really, really consider what's happening here, rather than just rubber stamping it through. And if you have any time or energy, to just drive by it, because like I said, all the charts and the topography charts can't really tell you the story. There's a lot more there. So.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any further testimony in opposition to the application? Any testimony from representatives of public agencies or questions? And now's the time for rebuttal by the applicant, if any. All right. Okay, or ORS section 197.763, paragraph 6A, states that upon request, the commission must either grant a continuance for no less than 7 days or hold the record open for no less than 7 days to permit any participant an opportunity to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence. Does any person who participated desire to request a continuance to provide additional testimony, argument, or evidence, or request the record be left open to submit additional written testimony, argument, or evidence? No. Okay. Does the applicant waive the opportunity to submit final written argument after the close of the record as provided in ORS section 197.763, paragraph 6E? Okay.
Would you repeat that, Steve, what he said?
Does the applicant waive the opportunity, and
No.
you're saying yes, correct?
I just wanted you to
Oh, okay.
repeat it because we couldn't hear. Yeah.
Pardon me, yeah.
I'd have to make a long-distance phone call, but I think would be okay waiving it. However, and just to simplify it, I'd say we waive the right to
Okay, thank you.
any other testimony.
Thank you. Prior to or during deliberations, commission may consult with city staff and the city attorney. Do not ask staff or legal counsel for new evidence, so we cannot enter anything new into the record at this point. Does the city attorney or staff have any comments concerning legal issues raised during these proceedings, instructions on the applicable law, or legal advice concerning the application of the law to the evidence in the record?
No, the only thing I would say, actually, I will say yes is the answer, actually. If you're anticipating in your deliberations asking questions that may result in new evidence, this would be a good time to ask them so that the applicant or the opposition may have the chance to rebut it in the hearing before you close the record for deliberations.
Why don't we all take a couple of seconds to look over our list of questions and see if you have any further questions to ask. What's that? Patty? Do you?
The concept of donating land to the city, the wetlands, for example, this buffer, even if it's only half, I don't know, I think you said about 6 acres, 5 or 6 acres of it are actually wetlands and the rest of it is open space. That, to me, conveys more than just ownership of the land, because it's a wetland. And where I come from, wetlands are significant if they have been identified by the state as a significant wetland, that means they have a value that needs to be protected. And I'm a little concerned that I'm not hearing any suggestions from planning staff on how to not just accept that as a donation, but to maintain it and preserve it as a wetland. Now, the idea that there's another phase that's going to envelop this wetland on the other side of it, so it's essentially going to be a little island wetland, but a little island wetland that still has connectivity hydrologically to Devil's Lake, is something I think we need to really think about. Devil's Lake has a lot of problems with eutrophication, and you put houses in with steep slopes and runoff, and people landscaping and putting things on those lawns, and then it runs into that, and then that wetland runs into the lake. I mean, you know, I'm not trying to scream the sky is falling here, but this is significant, and I am sensitive to your statement that once these are lost, they're lost. And I come from a state where they're all lost, essentially. And it's had incredible ramifications to things like the Pacific Flyway. So I'm really sensitive to wetlands and not just getting them dedicated to the city, but the city then turning around and making a commitment to protecting those and preserving them.
If I can respond a little bit to that.
Sure.
We are actually taking that 18 acres and we're going to add it to the Villages of Cascade Head planned unit development, and it will stay open space. It won't be developed.
Okay, it's great that you're not going to build anything on it,
You can.
but it's a thoroughfare for material and water and stuff into the lake. I mean, it's not just a static piece of property that will be open space for people to walk through. It has an ecological function. And my concern is that we as a city should take seriously the responsibility of maintaining that ecological function. And I'm nervous that I don't hear any suggestions for covenants or anything that is aimed at protecting wetland for what it actually is, which is a wetland, not an open space.
I'm with you, Patty, but unfortunately, I think what this has done is sparked a new conversation for another meeting, and that we can't actually imply any of these, what I think where we would want to go with pushing these lines back. We can't do that today, unfortunately, but what we can do is maybe affect the other side of it in a much more positive way in the future, but we have to do something in a different meeting.
Well, I think we can ask the planning staff to consider a condition that is some sort of behavioral buffer on those lots. No? Is that not something we can do?
You can if you can link it to applicable criteria for approval of this development.
And that's what I'm getting at with another meeting, that we can change the applicable criteria for the future.
Well, I think there are two issues. I think
Sure.
Richard is saying, yes, we can address that now in our discussion, right? And if we can prove that it's relevant to the objective criteria.
Right.
And second, if we decide we don't do that, we can also, for example, ask the city to consider preparing an ordinance to create a buffer zone for wetlands in the future. That's
Can do
an
that,
option.
yeah.
So the criteria that we have, again, are that it is substantially compatible with the other development that exists and future development of the area. The second criteria is that it has a reasonable time frame for completion. The third is that the limits on the construction impacts on the existing development. And then the reasonableness of the impacts of the new development, the 11 lots, on adjoining property
Guess it could vaguely.
Is that addressing comparable developed lots, or is that
Do you
addressing
have,
all?
you have that in your staff report? Can somebody read that, that criteria?
I've lost it on my,
Oh, you've lost it.
One of the criteria is about impacts on the neighborhood.
Yes, and that's this one, of the 11-lot development.
right.
And then the next one is whether there's adequate infrastructure in the vicinity and also provided with the development. And then the last one is maximum units and landscaping. And so we can go to the code. .52 and 2, I said 240, but it's planned unit development is 210. And then we have,
Deborah, can I ask a question first?
Sure.
Have you all lost access to our webpage for the pack for this evening?
I
I
have the
saved
packet,
mine
I just
on
can't
my-
find the
I can't,
particular.
I can't bring the packet up.
I saved mine on my computer, so I actually have it.
okay, I'm almost there. Okay, here it is. The commission shall approve or approve with conditions the plan if it finds that the plan, either as submitted or with conditions, meets all of the following criteria. The first one is it's substantially compatible with existing development. And if you want, I can read it word for word. The second one is the number of years, and there's a long paragraph about that. I don't think that's an issue. The third one is construction of development can be accomplished in a manner that does not create unreasonable negative impacts. I don't know that anybody's talking about that.
Say that again for me?
Oh, that's the one about the construction activity itself having impacts. The next one is that the development will not create unreasonable negative impacts on the areas surrounding the development or in the city. In order to assure the avoidance or mitigation of negative impacts, the Planning Commission may require the filing of restrictions in the county deed records, including but not limited to restrictions prohibiting the removal of specified landscaping and prohibiting open burning during construction, which is not really an issue, but so it's that those are examples.
Could another example be storm runoff into that wetland from the development?
Any runoff.
Any runoff?
What do you think about that, Richard?
Sorry, I was trying to see if the internet was working.
Okay, so we're
Question?
talking about,
Read E out, Deborah, if you would.
okay,
Starts with street, water.
okay, E is street, water, sewer, drainage, and drainage pretreatment, stormwater detention, and other similar facilities in the area surrounding the development and in the city are or will be adequate to provide for the health, safety, and welfare of the development's population densities and the type of development proposed, taking into consideration existing and projected future demands on those facilities. That's and then the next one is street, water, sewer, drainage, and drainage pretreatment, stormwater detention, and other similar facilities proposed to be constructed as part of the development are adequate to provide for the health, safety, and welfare of the population densities and the type of development proposed. So if you're concerned about the surrounding, the impact of this development on surrounding properties or surrounding areas, probably D is the one that is closest. And that is, again, the development will not create unreasonable negative impacts on the areas surrounding the development or in the city.
Can I ask a crazy question? Just a thing that floated into my head about this.
Sure.
Since that 18 acres kind of butts up against over here, I can't really recall where it kind of, I don't know if there's a way to connect that with another road. Is there another road anywhere?
For what?
I'm just curious if maybe we could trade those 4 lots on the north end for some sort of other variation, just to push that away from, just to push the development away from.
Well, and
in a
again,
way,
you know,
or change the shapes, and so I don't know if we could. I know, because this is not easy fun to do, but.
This is not, again, this is not exact, do we have the wetland determination as part of the application materials? Dave, do you know?
Yeah, the preliminary jurisdictional determination.
Okay, does it actually show the delineation?
You have a map.
No.
It's just a
Yeah.
one-page.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me see here. We'll see if we've got anything. I don't think it, I'm not sure that it does. But it seems like I did see it, so. Mhm. You should come up here. Yeah, you should come up here. Yes. That's all right.
I thought maybe I could help. Lincoln Palisades Phase 3, the master plan was approved, and then the detailed master plan and subdivision, so to speak, plans
Sure.
spoke to those kinds of conditions. And we have a vegetative swale for stormwater treatment that will addressed those concerns. And we will do the same thing for these lots, especially the two lots that are the closest to the wetlands.
I totally understand what you're saying, and I see that you guys are doing a very good job with your due diligence. Our concern as citizens who live here in this beautiful coastline
Right.
is that if you want to look at eagles, you don't build your house at the eagle's house. You go to the eagle's house, you check them out. If these houses are right up in their yard, there won't be elk to view, there won't be eagles to view, there won't be a lot of these things to view that people go there to enjoy. And it's a tough one.
I think, I'm sorry, but I think this, what's up on the screen now, this is the tree inventory, but I believe this is also the delineated wetland. So, yeah, this is showing you exactly where that
I mean, how
wetland
that abuts to the
is determined
wetland,
to
it's
be.
like your little brother pointing his finger at your face and saying, I'm not touching you, but he's close enough to poke your eye out. That's kind of how that looks.
That's understandable. However, the land that was deeded to the city contains the wetlands with specific reason to avoid having the lots be on the wetlands.
That's
And
on
this-
the wetland.
What's that?
I mean, that's on a wetland.
It's-
That doesn't look like it's not on a wetland. It looks like it's all the way up against the wetland, which is.
Property that the wetland is in the city, and the lot is the other one, and is to the west of that. However, a stormwater management plan for that lot and a restriction on that lot for stormwater management is not out of the question. We're not disagreeing. I'm agreeing with you.
No,
That's all I'm saying.
We're just trying to understand
Can you
that.
tell me,
Slow down here. Are you finished,
Yeah, go ahead.
John? Okay.
can you tell me briefly what that storm swale might look like or where it might be located on the map?
Well.
I mean, I'm trying to figure out,
it would be-
topographically, it's all, gravity's against you.
No, actually, it's in our favor, because we're going to
Keeping-
be using the slope of the lot
Right.
to gravity feed the runoff from roof drains and footing drains to an area in the lot that's still above the lot line, which is still above the wetland, so to speak, and those areas downstream. That treatment can take place in several ways. It can be.
So you're thinking about putting a linear swale along the back of those lots? Is that what I'm hearing?
That is one possibility, yes. There are other methods to do that. You can do those in pocketed rain gardens. You can do them in rain gardens with
Yeah.
vegetation and then overflows that go to an outlet. Or you can do a swale that's of minimal depth, 1.5 to 2 feet deep at max, and with sideboards and allow for treatment. So keep in mind that vegetation itself is the buffer between the wetlands. So if you went to a complete diffused runoff condition, so that every drop of water was completely spread out over 100 feet and let it run in a sheet flow, crossing the vegetation only takes 15 to 20 feet before it's absorbed by the plant materials, before it gets to that so-called, to the wetlands.
Depending on the vegetation and depending on
Well,
what's in the water.
I understand that. I'm just citing an example.
Sure.
That can be used. So, and again, it's not turning a cheek or turning an eye. Each building site is going to have to be brought in for a building plan approval, and those also can have conditions, as the city code addresses. It says, have you addressed stormwater and so forth. So,
And these can be addressed in the master plan review as well? is
and they
that-
can be, that's correct.
So we do have a final master plan, and you would come back, and if you would maybe be showing some more detail about what the stormwater treatment and
Yeah, that
detention
we
would
would
be.
make our suggested improvements or, I guess, remedies, mitigation for those conditions in the next go-around, the next bite at the apple, so to speak.
So if you wanted to make a condition, you could say, that you condition approval on seeing adequate pre-treatment and detention in the final master plan.
Yeah, I suspect that we've hammered Mr. Reese pretty sufficiently on this topic in terms of him understanding what the desire is, when you come back with that plan.
And I'm correct in something we said earlier, that the state does not require a buffer zone to development located adjacent to a wetland.
That's right.
That includes the Army Corps of Engineers? That's every, there's no
It's the
federal
Department of
guideline?
State Lands who has jurisdiction over our wetlands.
Is there any federal regulations on that that might be above them?
They've delegated that to the
They've
state.
delegated
They
to
have
the
delegated,
state.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Yeah. Any further questions of
Mr.
staff?
Chair, you may want to give the person who testified in opposition an opportunity to rebut what was just said, so,
Any further
if
questions?
there aren't
of
any
staff?
further.
Would Mr. Reese like an opportunity to
No,
rebut?
not Mr. not
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
So the woman who testified in
Oh,
opposition.
would you like an opportunity to rebut any of? Come to the microphone.
I just want to say that I'm new here in Lincoln City, and I really appreciate this process, and I feel in very good hands with this group, that everybody here really listened to everything and is considering it, and that's very encouraging, that there are real people here that are really paying attention. I don't know what will happen, but I feel like everyone here has a real interest in it. That's been great to see, so thank you.
Thank you for your participation, and please keep involved. All right. I'll ask this question again. I'm not sure I asked it before. Does the city attorney or staff have any comments concerning legal issues raised during these proceedings, instructions on the applicable law, or legal advice concerning the application of the law to the evidence in the record?
No.
Right. This matter is returned to the table for deliberations and recommendations. So we need to close the
You
hearing.
need to close the hearing and the record.
Yes.
All right. So is there a motion to close the hearing and the record?
I move that we close the hearing and the record on PUD 2018-01. Is that what it is? Thank you.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? May we have a roll call vote, please, Kate?
All right, McFarland,
Yes.
Kier,
Yes.
Closing the record.
just to close the record. Yes?
Is that a yes? or
Was
no?
that yes?
Yes.
Okay. Schlesinger,
Yes.
Cunningham,
Yes.
Crowan,
Yes.
and Griffiths.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, the hearing and the record are closed. All right.
I would suggest that what he suggested as mitigation plans,
Could you speak directly into the
I
microphone?
am speaking directly into the
I'm
microphone.
having a hard time hearing it. I'm sorry.
What he suggested as would be an option for us to bring up in the next phase, be stipulated as a condition for our recommendation of approval. In other words, that we see some kind of a mitigation plan written into the final that will show us what his intent is on each of
Addressing,
those
for
lots.
example, runoff into the wetland. Yeah.
Right, or into those culverts that'll move the water away from the property, not into the wetlands.
Any thoughts on that?
I
Miles,
agree.
Speak into the microphone.
I agree with that condition that we should.
Any further discussion?
Do we want, would someone like to make a motion in that regard to the conditions? So I think the city would like us to, conditions are in Appendix A, plus the two that Deborah recommended, planning recommended, regarding the use of Northeast Devils Lake Boulevard, correct?
Yes.
And curtailing construction traffic during the city's quiet hours.
Yes.
And does that also, okay, that's fine. And then the third one would be the mitigation. Would someone like to state that as a motion?
A motion that we do exactly what Steve just asked for.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right.
If, Mr. Chair, just for clarity's sake, what is the third condition?
The third condition is that we have in the master plan,
Final master plan?
in the final master plan, a clear approach to how the mitigation will be done to keep the water from the construction sites from moving into the wetlands.
Not just during construction, right?
Right, but during construction, but it'll be there permanently in the master plan.
Are you ready to vote? Kate, can we have a roll call, please? Vote, please.
Sure. Schlesinger,
Yes.
McFarland,
Yes.
Here,
Yes.
Crowan,
Yes.
Cunningham,
Yes.
and Griffiths.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay. This is a tentative decision of the Planning Commission, and staff will prepare.
So, Mr. Chair, was that was a motion just to add a condition, is that correct?
Oh, right.
Right.
We need to
So-
approve your motion to
Close?
close the,
No,
No.
the
You
vote
already
on.
closed it. You need to vote on the
Vote on.
preliminary master plan.
we need a vote to approve the preliminary master plan with those conditions.
I motion to accept the master plan with conditions as stated.
Is there a second?
I second.
And we have a vote, roll call vote, please, Kate?
All right. Here,
Yes.
Schlesinger,
Yes.
McFarland,
Yes.
Crowan,
Yes.
Cunningham,
Yes.
and Griffiths.
Yes.
Motion carries.
So, we have a tentative decision of the Planning Commission, and staff will prepare a final order for adoption at the next available meeting, or,
Actually, that will be the 17th?
17th.
Yeah.
yes.
So I have drafted a final order, but I will have to make some changes, which, you would have to wait for me to do before we could continue. Or we can just do it at the next meeting, if you'd like to have it.
Do you know how much time you would need
17th.
to prepare the final order right now?
I just have to write that third condition on there.
All right. And is there, I know you gave me something
Make
earlier. Is there something you'd like me to do while you're working on that?
Yes, yes. So would you like me to go ahead and prepare the final order for consideration this evening?
That work for you? Fine with me, yeah. Sure.
Okay,
Thank you.
Kate, do you have that motion, last motion, written down somewhere? So I sort of do.
Would it be better to wait?
Would you rather wait?
I think it'd be better to wait.
Okay.
We will.
Will it impact?
We don't have a 120-day issue here at all, so,
We have plenty of time.
yeah,
Yeah,
plenty of.
time. All right.
Sorry, buddy.
We can have
So
more time to
close.
think about that wording of the third condition.
Okay.
Okay.
All right,
thank
and I
you.
will listen to the videotape and make sure I have it the way it was stated.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, no old business this evening, no new business. And
That's not quite true.
We do have one thing, and I believe you have that in your hand. The city is going to try to apply for a build grant, and the build grant is the new name for what we used to call Tiger, if you're familiar with those grants in the past. They're a federal grant from the Department of Transportation. and they are for infrastructure improvements. We are hoping to get a grant to build Foothills Boulevard through the Nell Scott neighborhood. And that is the plan that we developed over a couple-year period and adopted a year ago. So the Foothills Boulevard is sort of the main spine, and it's a parallel to the highway. Not only does it provide the main access in the interior of this Nell Scott neighborhood, but which is east of the highway, but it also would provide an alternative to the highway in case of emergency or, severe congestion, and a connection all the way up eventually to East Devils Lake Road and then all the way up to the north end of town. So in order to be competitive, we want to have letters of support. I'm asking the council for one next Monday night, and I have drafted one for your consideration. Steve has it, and we'll read it to you.
Miles, I think this is going to make your day, so I'll read it to you now. July 3rd, 2018, to the reviewers of Lincoln City's build application. The Lincoln City Planning Commission wholeheartedly supports the city's application for funds to construct a new street that will serve as a catalyst for development of 240 acres in the Nell Scott Gap neighborhood. Foothills Boulevard is a key component in the Nell Scott Gap neighborhood plan, which the city adopted last year after a 2-year planning process that involved area property owners, the Nell Scott neighborhood, the larger community, and city officials, assisted by a consulting planning firm, an architect town planner, 2 engineering firms, and an economist. The Nell Scott Gap neighborhood plan accomplished our first 2 objectives and promises to deliver on the others. An adopted neighborhood plan with comprehensive plan amendments and implementing regulations that identifies infrastructure and other public investments needed to support desired development in the study area. A well-prepared plan designed to produce an attractive, transit-oriented, walkable neighborhood composed of vibrant centers linked by convenient transportation, efficient use of improved highway facilities and the surrounding land area, transportation mode choices for residents and visitors in the study area, a mix of uses and well-designed public spaces that create a special place, economic vitality by planning for attractive land uses and the movement of goods and people in the study area. The Nell Scott Gap area has many advantages for a new neighborhood. Land adjacent to Southeast 23rd Drive contains the best potential for development of new industry. The area is within a short walk from the Taft Elementary School, Taft High School, and the Oregon Coast Community College. Large city-owned open spaces flank the neighborhood on the south and the north, and the Pacific Ocean and beaches are within a half-mile to the west. Because it lies on the east side of Highway 101, the area is more affordable than the vacation properties closer to the ocean. The plan proposes to daylight a partially buried creek and to restore it to fish-bearing capacity. The plan protects wetlands and other sensitive areas by designating them as greenways, open spaces, and pedestrian trails. Developers generally are responsible for dedicating right-of-way and paying for the infrastructure required by their projects. Unfortunately, although they are prepared to dedicate the needed right-of-way, the landowners who are ready to build affordable housing in this area cannot incur the expense of constructing Foothills Boulevard from the south end where it must cross wetlands, or further north where the alignment must traverse rough topography. They and we need help with getting this project off the ground. Thank you for the opportunity to apply for build funding. If you select our proposal and we are able to construct Foothills Boulevard, the development of the Nell Scott Gap mixed-use neighborhood will soon follow. Sincerely, the Lincoln City Planning Commission. Thank you for drafting this, Deborah, for us, and I would encourage us all to sign it.
Yes.
Everybody in agreement? No, great.
Wait. Wait. Sorry, it's me again. Why is there no mention in there about the fact that this would provide an alternative escape route? I mean, that there's a very huge safety component to having another road other than 101 in and out of this town. And it seems to me that if we're applying for a grant, it would be reasonable to point out to them that this is not just an economic development road. This road has real significant value to this community, that when the subduction zone goes, we're going to need another access, egress, ingress route.
Well,
So
I have
want
an
that
opportunity for a 30-page narrative, and I'm addressing that in that. We also have a cost-benefit analysis that we're having an economist do, and he is talking about the miles, saved, or the hours saved, and so forth. I have also drafted a letter from the City Council that addresses some of these things. So this is a letter that I thought would best come from the Planning Commission making the points about neighborhood development, and it touches on the transportation issue, but I think I hit that more heavily in the council's. They haven't seen it yet, or I could pull it up and
I have a
show it
suggestion
to you.
too. Perhaps we could include a letter from Lincoln City's emergency coordinator in terms of the value of having this road
Well, yes, we
for
probably could do that.
evacuation.
Yes, yes. And if you'd like, I can add something to this letter, and then Steve could sign it. Well, I'd like, it'd be nice if you all signed it. We could have it be from the chair on behalf of all the members, and then Steve could come in and sign it any time between now and when the grant goes in. So if you'd like me to change it and add something to it,
I would
I
like to see
certainly
you
can.
add at least a sentence about that. I mean, I think, Planning Commission's more than planning houses, It's planning for the safety and security of our
Planning Commission
population.
in agreement? Add a sentence or two?
agreement with Patty,
Okay.
Okay, fine,
Yeah.
we'll do that.
So you will draft it, then you'll call me, and I'll come in and sign it on behalf of the Planning Commission.
Okay, that sounds
That
great.
sounds
Do
good.
you want us to
Gary,
sign
you have
this in the meantime or not?
No, if we're not
Value.
going to use it, you don't have to sign it, but thank you,
It's very well written, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Deborah. And thanks to Miles for nudging us. Yeah, thank you. So, no Planning Commission training tonight?
Right, thank you.
Any reports and comments from staff?
No.
From commissioners?
Do you guys, I can try to give you guys an update on, I can't even remember the whole acronym for that other committee I'm liaising.
Design
for.
standard.
The Design Standard Committee?
Yeah, there's too many acronyms in my life, I don't know
I
what's going on.
don't think that one has an acronym, so
I don't know. It could.
Yes.
just the Design Committee.
Standard.
Yeah, we had, Steve was there as well, subbing in for somebody, but there's a really fine group of people that have been collected from all over town with very different opinions, views, and talents, and I think everybody's kind of got everybody seems to be pretty kind of on the same road, which is really nice and amazing, wanting more permanent street art displays and, kind of beautifying 101 so that people feel welcome when they come into town and, remember it for more than just a pass-through town. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out on the other end of this thing. I only have 3 meetings to be involved in, but I'm really excited for this. This seems like a really neat project, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
We look forward to further reports from you on what you're doing. Thank you, Sean.
No problem.
Anything else,
Yeah,
Patty?
yeah. July 5th is our 3rd annual beach cleanup after the 4th of July, focused on the Rhodes End area. So I'd like to invite all of you to come down and not to bring your trash from your beach, but to actually help clean up the Rhodes End beach. We've got some great sponsors, including the city, And Safeway's donating donuts and fruit again, so.
What time do you start?
It's from 9 to 1.
9
And
to
it
1.
starts, you sign up at the state park.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah.
I have,
Future agenda items and next meetings, do we?
Next meeting would be the 17th, and I think the only thing on the agenda is the final order from tonight.
And I think we're talking about the issue you brought up last time about rent issues.
yeah, about the no-cause evictions. I know Richard Townsend had said that he had some things, Apicella, excuse me, I looked at your nameplate when I said that. He said he needed to check on some things, but he said he was going to bring some notes maybe to this weekend, this meeting, but he's not here, so I don't know what he has to give back on us. I guess we're going to wait for that to move forward. Okay.
Good, well, thank you all, and tonight's meeting is adjourned. Happy 4th of July.
Don't hurt yourself there with that hammer.